Welcome to the Book Club, the show that spotlights undiscovered authors and their books. Now, here's your host, John Austin.
Thanks, Ed, and we have an absolutely terrific show beginning this morning with the return of Sebastian Roberts with his exciting novel filled with adventure, intrigue, and an assortment of spies, killers, good guys, and bad guys. The book is Day 183, and on the second half of the show today, Jean Joachim is back, and she returns with a stunner and a new book and a new series. But we begin this morning with Sebastian Roberts, who is and has a very interesting background, including he was an intelligence officer in the U.S. Navy, scuba and wilderness survivor instructor, and that's just among other things that you have done. But we love to have you back, so welcome back to the Book Club, Sebastian.
Thank you, sir. It's great to be here.
Well, it's great to have you here. I loved this book, which I've told you. This is the name of the title of this book is Day 183, and apparently this was the first book you wrote.
Yes, sir. And you can say that as much as you want. The I loved part.
Well, I did love it, and it's a throwback to the thrillers that I grew up with, where the author knows enough for the setup and then to move you into that book, and by the time you're done, you're so hooked. And you're trying to figure out what's going on, and you just have one good thing after another. But anyway, let's begin with just a very brief overview of Day 183.
Okay, well, basically, as you said, it's the first book I wrote, and I actually wrote the outline of it many, many years ago, about 25 years, 30 years ago. And it's the story of a Navy lieutenant who, right at the end of the Vietnam War, his tour is up.
Okay.
And so rather than make a career out of the Navy, he decides to go back to graduate school. So he resigns his commission and he gets accepted at a Florida graduate school, which I completely made up.
Okay.
No matter what my friend said, but completely made up.
Right.
And the first person he meets there is this very nice looking young lady.
Right.
He doesn't know it yet, but she ends up being his chemistry professor later on. So he's in for a few surprises. But anyway, he just wants to go back to graduate school and get an education and study fish. And unfortunately, this particular young lady is involved in a few things through her father, and he gets drawn into this smuggling part.
Okay.
And we're not going to give away how it ends, but the smugglers lose, of course.
Okay. Well, I'm going to take you through it because when I started the book, and the book opens and we meet the Navy lieutenant, and it's Peter Lewandowski. Right?
Yes, sir.
I got that from. As he arrives at the Florida Institute of Marine Technology. And the first person he meets is this Dr. Harry Roth. Now, we don't know anything about Harry Roth at this time, right?
No.
Okay. So as I started this book, and I thought, well, okay, let's see what's happened. Well, Pete's duties include living aboard.
Well,
right?
Pete made a deal with the Marine Institute because they own two research ships, and they had a captain for one and not the other. So Pete, just getting out of the Navy as a lieutenant, and he'd served on a minesweeper, and so he knew how to run a ship. So the deal he made was, tell you what, I'll live on board the ship, and I'll captain her for you at this reduced rate, and I don't have to pay tuition, which Navy guys know how to do that. Okay, any situation you get them into, they're going to cut a deal. It's not going to be on written in paper or anything like that. Not open to everybody, but they'll cut a deal.
Okay. Well, this is the way it begins, and it starts very slowly because his duties is he's working his thesis and he's doing all that. But the first thing that happens is he meets this gorgeous woman, and this is Sarah Roth.
Right, Sarah.
Yeah, Sarah, and so he knows that Sarah is actually Dr. Roth's daughter.
Right, but what you didn't mention yet is that Dr. Roth is Pete's boss as his thesis advisor and his major professor.
Okay.
So now he's got this little thing he's got to deal with.
Okay, right. Okay. Now there's an underwater inspection of the ships, actually, and Sarah's going to go with him and do this thing. And she starts talking about, and this is when I got hooked in the book, she starts talking about her father and saying she's very worried about him.
Right. Well, Sarah turns out to be a very adventurous young lady as well as exceptionally bright. So during the time that Pete went to was in the Navy, Sarah had actually obtained her doctorate degree. So that's a short time frame. That's pretty unusual. So what strikes Pete as most odd is that here's this person who he's never met before, and she's immediately opening up to him, and in a way that says, I've got a problem. Come help me out. And so he's torn because
Right.
she's very attractive, but he doesn't need any drama in his life right now.
Right.
He's
Right.
getting out of the Navy, trying to start a new career. He just wants things to go smoothly. So he resists. He doesn't
Okay.
want to get involved.
All right. Now, there's some things that happen. The first thing that happens, he starts, I think she asks him, what was your spookiest dive? And he tells her.
Yeah, he does. Oh, you want to hear the dive?
Well, I want to hear the dive because I understand you actually did the dive.
Well, I did. And that's one of the things that makes this book kind of interesting to me is I had a friend who read it, and they said they didn't realize that it was a thriller until halfway through.
Right.
And I went back, you're right. And the first half of the book, or first portion of the book, reads more like an adventure book.
Right.
And it's got the spookiest dive. And on this particular dive, and I did go on all of the dives that are in this book and the other books I wrote as well, because that's the best thing to draw from.
Right.
You're
okay.
not inventing something, you're remembering it.
Right.
But out in this little lake in central Texas, and it had been very quiet, and a bacterial growth had occurred. The bacteria was purple, and it had created this layer about halfway down the water column. The water above it was a little bit warmer, and the water below it was a little cooler, but it was so calm that the bacteria found their own little spot right there at the edge.
Right.
And so swimming down into it, it looked like the bottom was covered with purple jello, but you could swim through it.
Okay.
And so you swim through it, and then you're looking back up through this layer of purple algae or purple bacteria,
Right.
and the whole thing becomes very surreal. But what really made it weird was on that particular day, there was a thunderstorm, and lightning hits the lake. And so we're 30, 35 feet down in this lake, looking through the purple jello back up at the surface, and the lightning comes through, and the whole thing starts to shimmer and wiggle and flash, and it was indeed the spookiest dive I've ever been on.
Okay. Well, it interested Sarah. It interested me, and it'll interest you because as you read about it. Now, there's a character that comes up right about now, and I asked you about it when we talked because she's a very, very small part of this book. But this is someone that they meet. Well, he knows her, but this is Aunt Emily, and she's just in this thing for a very short time. But the idea is how she gets around her house and how other people get around her house.
And I put her in there specifically because, and she really doesn't have any relationship to the story other than Harry and Sarah were the ones who did this, and it develops their character. But Aunt Emily has a great story, and it's a true story, and so I threw it in there.
Right. Okay.
But she's a person who's gone blind,
Right.
and her big hobby before she went blind was gardening. So Harry, who happens to be a botanist, this is the Dr. Harry Roth guy,
Right.
happens to be a botanist. He builds a garden in her backyard, and all of the paths in the garden are a different surface type. And in the center of the garden, there's a water fountain. And in each corner of the garden, there's a different sounding wind chime. And each of the shrubs along the way have a different flower, a different texture, a different smell, a different feel. So Emily can know exactly where she is in the garden just through her non-visual senses. And she can now enjoy her gardening again.
It's an amazing story. Is it true?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. Okay, now we've got them setting up, now not Aunt Emily, now we're back to Peter and Sarah, and they're setting up the cameras and their equipment for his thesis. He's studying fish underwater, schools of fish.
He wants to study fish behavior, specifically how they school, how they get together.
Right, okay. At that point, the second one comes up, the second dive comes up, and this is when Pete's scariest dive. Not the spookiest. This is the scariest.
This is the scariest one.
Right.
And
this is again one you did.
It is. It was in the Jacksonville River up by the Navy base up off of Jacksonville. Okay. And this guy had dropped his little outboard motor off of the dock. So he says, go get it. I'm going, well, okay, put on a tank, go get it. It's like, 8 feet deep? So, but what I didn't know is I get in the water, and the bottom there was very muddy.
Right.
So I get in the water and it's dark. And so you get blackout conditions. Can't see a thing. Even with a flashlight, you can't see a thing. So I'm swimming down, wondering what I'm going to run into.
Right.
Feeling for this outboard motor. And all of a sudden, my breath gets hard to take. Everything becomes difficult to work, And so I go, oh, there's something wrong here. My equipment's not working right. I turn around and I make a slow ascent because I didn't want to actually come up under the dock or something like that. And it turns out at the end of it that I had swam into a layer of mud about the consistency of loose mayonnaise.
Oh, God.
And so, it's all in the regulator. It's all everywhere. Right. And we never did get the motor.
But you got out.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm not dead. I'm here.
So did Peter. Okay. Now, there's a night dive with Sarah. And after the night dive, first of all, they're getting friendly. They're getting friendly.
But he's still resisting.
Right. But now the thing that happens, because at this point, all he knows is that she's Roth's daughter.
And she's got this problem that he doesn't want to get involved in.
Right. So, but he goes to his first, the class was the chemical oceanography.
Chemistry,
class.
Right.
First class, and he gets a big surprise.
Yeah, well, she walks in as the professor, and he's going, holy cow, what am I supposed to do now? Because he's been attracted to this woman.
Right.
And, and she's, the ship we left out apart. The biological research vessel is owned by Harry,
right,
who inherited it from his brother. And so Sarah keeps the Brightwork clean, and so, and then he rents it back to the Institute for $1 a year or something like that.
Right.
So,
okay.
So they become friendly because they're working together on the ship. And the whole time they're resisting. And it's kind of funny because I've had people say that at the beginning of the book, they don't like Pete.
Right.
Because he's not reacting to Sarah the way they think he should.
Yeah.
By the end of the book, they like him.
He's actually a great character. And the truth is, as I mentioned, as I started the book, I thought, it took about 20 pages before I realized that as soon as I heard about the Dr. Roth's problems, or that she was worried about. But up to that point, I thought, well, are you going to give us your memoirs going through this school? And obviously, that's not the way it worked. Now, the next thing that happened was there was Pete and Sarah. They did a working dive, and there were no problems except for a very big fish.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But it didn't hurt him.
No, and a lot of people don't realize how big the fish that they call a Goliath grouper, but is in my mind still a Jewfish.
Yeah, right. Yes.
How big they can get.
Yeah.
And in this particular dive, I'm relating the surprise at being at 95 feet off the coast of Florida, and all of a sudden next to you there's a fish that's longer than I am, probably weighs 700 pounds, and obviously could headbutt me into oblivion if it wanted to, but all it did was flap its gills.
Right. They're not dangerous, so I guess.
Well, they could be.
Right.
But he was just saying, you know what, dude, this is my spring. Go someplace else.
Right.
So I left.
Well, I heard a story. There was this was an engineer at a radio station in Florida, in Fort Pierce, long time ago. But he went out, because the transmitter was on the water, but it was in, 15 feet of water, right there off the bank. And he went out and jumped in to do something with the transmitter thing, and there was a Jewfish sitting right there, and he had no idea what it was, but you could see him coming back up and screaming. And they said, "No, it's okay." Okay. Now, here's where things now begin to get really interesting, because they developed the first film. They're taking the films of these fish that are going on.
Right. He just put a camera in the water to automatically film schooling fish so that he can analyze them later.
Right. And as they developed the first film, there's an unexpected powerboat in the pictures, and they have no idea what this is and why it's there. And then they go tell Dr. Roth what they found, and he's not happy.
He's not happy.
Okay.
So what happened is, Pete's got this automatic camera, and it's got a very early version of a motion sensor. So a school official set it up, but so will a passing powerboat.
Right.
So when these pictures come out, and Harry Roth sees the pictures, he realizes, although Pete and Sarah don't yet, Harry realizes that whatever has been bothering him, they're onto.
Okay.
And so he gets upset.
Right. But he does tell them because he has to.
He's got to tell him something.
Yeah, right. Okay. So, and actually, as it turns out, that this boat is a 30-foot cabin cruiser, and one of the things that there's a guano K, I guess it's a made-up
Made up.
Yeah,
Like,
made up key. But they identify the cruiser as the treasure hunt, and that becomes a big thing as we move further into the
the treasure hunt is an integral part of the whole
story.
operation.
Right. Okay. We're talking to Sebastian Roberts about his terrific novel, Day 183. Okay, now they're photographing the hull of the treasure hunt because now they realize there's something going on because the first time they saw it, it had canisters under it.
Right.
Second time they see it, there are no canisters.
Right. So these canisters are long, kind of think of them as extra large torpedo tube kind of things.
Right.
And they're stuck up on the hull. And it's a hull is a good place to hide stuff.
Right.
Especially if it's on the outside, because anybody inspecting from the inside doesn't see it.
Right.
Nobody inspects the outside. So they've been outed here accidentally. And so Pete and Sarah end up getting pictures of the canisters as they are attached.
Okay. All right. Now there are some more pictures and that they look at, and this actually is a school of squirrelfish, I think, that he sees, and they're just looking at it, but it actually has a clue because when he sees this, he realizes there's something wrong.
Yes.
Okay. So the clue now is, and again, this is when they went back to Dr. Roth, and he told them the whole story and said, okay, we're in trouble. Now there's a second ship that's involved. This is the Trenchant.
Yes, and that one's owned by the Institute.
Okay. And they don't know why these two ships, what they're doing, but there's obviously some connection between the two of them.
Yes, there is, and that's what they eventually figure out.
Okay. All right. Now, there is a point here. Sarah's actually threatened they're going to beat her if she continues doing this stuff, and they're going to rape her, and they don't even know who these people are that are going to do this. But actually, she's afraid.
Right. Well, this is, and all of these things you're talking about are little clues dropped at a time, and we're a couple of 100 pages into the book.
Right.
150 pages into the book. And so all of these little things you're mentioning are all spread out, and putting them together is, it's not obvious right at the beginning.
Right.
But Dr. Cortez, who is the head of the geology department, who runs the Trenchant, is apparently involved in all of this. And he's the one who had his guys threaten Sarah in order to keep Harry in line from blowing the whistle to the cops.
Right. And when they went to this guy, they were trying to get him to cover for him. It didn't work that way. Okay, now something happens that this group of Coast Guard people show up, but it turns out they're actually not the Coast Guard. And it doesn't take them long. They come in, we're the Coast Guard, and within a day they've explained to them that they're not.
Right. Well, it's just a cover to get on a ship. All ships are inspected by the Coast Guard, and a research vessel is technically carrying students as passengers, so they get inspected, pretty heavily.
Right.
And so these guys come aboard, and we're going to do the inspection. And Pete doesn't know anything. He hasn't been there long enough to know who the regular guys are.
Right. Right.
So he lets him on board, and the ensign who's running the show there pulls him aside, and he said, I'm not really with the Coast Guard. I'm with the FBI, and we need your help.
Right.
Of course, now Pete's button is, formal naval officer. And if the FBI, his country, needs his help, he's going to stand up and salute.
Right.
So,
all right. Now there's some things coming up, and I want to talk about a couple of them, and then we'll get. I want to spend a little time with you, but there's a few things. Now we have a new plan, and one of the strange stories, and I guess it actually happened to you in some way, but Pete ends up under the ship in a net, going from one place to another, and they don't know he's under there.
Well, yeah, there's stuff when you write, you write about stuff that you know about.
Right.
Sometimes I did it. Sometimes my buddy did it.
Okay.
Right. But there are different ways of retrieving a military diver.
Okay.
All right. And what I describe is a variation of one of the normal ways of retrieving a military diver. And the trick is to retrieve the diver without letting anybody know you're retrieving a diver.
Right.
Because you don't want people who are watching to know that you've just retrieved a diver. You get it. So,
right, yeah.
So I invented this way that's very similar, but basically the ship is rigged with a trawl for hauling shrimp. And the diver just swims into the trawl and gets pulled up on deck.
Okay. All right. So now they plant trackers, and it turns out that there's a long night at sea because they can't leave. because they want to do some stuff the next morning. So, but they can't go back. So it's Sarah and Pete in the middle of the ocean by themselves, not sleeping much.
Right, and the thing is that, remember the two ships we mentioned, the Trenchant, which is the geology research vessel, and then the dive boat, which is the treasure hunt.
Right.
They're working together.
Okay.
And with these canisters. And there's this very narrow window of time but when the canisters are on the ocean floor that neither ship is near them.
Okay.
So Pete's got to get there in that little window of time and do his thing.
Right.
So that's why they get stuck out there.
Okay.
And Pete's on the island and Sarah's on the ship, so nothing happens.
Right. So, and one of the things they've got to put something into those canisters.
The tracker.
Yeah, and they don't know because they get a big surprise when they open up because they had no idea what was in those canisters, and they got a big surprise there.
No, they figured, I mean, it's 1976. They figured it was drugs.
Right. And it wasn't.
No, it wasn't drugs.
Okay. All right. I'm going to stop here for a minute, but there is a couple of things that I want to mention. First of all, there is an explosion around the boathouse, and I'll let you either talk about it or tell them read this book. So you
well, let's just say that at this particular time is when, instead of becoming an adventure book, it turns out to things being exploded and kidnapping and people dying and all that other kind of stuff. Okay.
Okay. All right. Now there's one. I'm going to stop but there's one character that hasn't come in yet, and I just love this character, and I guarantee you read this book. Everybody that reads this book. Every guy for sure that reads this book will love this character, and her name is Agent Bane, and this is the first time that she's appeared in the book. Yeah. But not the last time in the series. No.
She grows up with the series. The last book I wrote, she was in her 60s.
Oh, you're kidding?
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay. Anyway, folks, you're going to love this book. This is a really, really good book. The man is excellent at developing the story. Once you start reading, you're going to be into it, and you're never going to lose interest. But anyway, tell them how they can get the book, and also mention your website.
Okay. This book is available either on Kindle or Nook form. Kindle or Nook.
Right.
And in hard copy, it's only available on my website right now. And my partner is the one who owns the website. So you can go to Tom. Okay. His name is Tom Cuba.
Okay.
Okay, so you go to tomcuba.net.
Right.
And you can have access to buying a hard copy book.
Okay.
You can get me on Facebook.
Okay.
Under Sebastian Roberts, author.
Okay.
And I'm also on Twitter at Sebastian Del Rob.
Okay.
But if you go to the website, there's links to all of those things. And if you find me on Facebook, there's links to the website. So just you got to remember Tom Cuba. That's the only thing, my partner's name.
Okay. All right. Well, you'll see him. You'll be able to look him up also on the John Austin's book club. But anyway, now I want to ask you, because I know this was the first book that you wrote, but this series continues, and I've read two of your books now. The one had nothing to do with this.
Right.
This one, yeah.
It was completely different.
Different. But they're both, I love that book. I truly love this book, and I can't wait to have you tell me what happens now. I mean, where did you go from here, and then what's done and what's coming?
Well, essentially I wrote this story, and you end up at the end of the book, and you've got these great characters like Agent Brandy Bane.
Right.
I wish we had more time to spend on her because she really is something else. But it's like, okay, in your imaginations, these people didn't just go away. So, what happens next to them? So then I wrote another book that shared the same two characters.
Okay.
And actually in the second book, Brandy is the lead character.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. And so then she and another FBI agent, Bob, they become the lead characters in the next one, which is Flight 885. Okay. And that's also available in Nook or Kindle. No, but it's under the title Grace because it's a trilogy.
Okay.
And then the third one, the four of them get together along with Harry, who gets a new girlfriend, and they go to the Yucatan and they deal with some drug smuggling there.
Okay.
And then I don't want to give away too much.
No.
But the next one is a couple of years later, and then Pete and Sarah obviously get married. Well, their child then grows up and joins the Marines, and the next book is his foray into the Marines. And then in the last book, which is called Dragonfly, that son, Harold, is now in his 40s and is working at the White House.
Okay, and they can get all of this information on your website.
Absolutely.
Or on your pals for-
TomCubitt.net.
Right, yes, okay. Now, okay, and we have been talking to Sebastian Roberts about this terrific book. It's called 183.
Day
And-
183.
Yeah, and also get the book. Get the book and get to his website. Now, don't go away because Gene Joachim is up next with a book you're going to love, and we'll be right back after these messages.